Take seats as you were. Greetings of the day, ladies and or gentlemen, or both, or whatever. My name is Major Mike Webb. For your information or edification or satisfaction or whatever, I am not QAnon or any other mysterious anonymous character, but rather a person very much in public view. And everything in the following brief can be verified or fact-checked or researched in the open source environment, be it a closed library due to pandemic crisis or with the resources available on the World Wide Web, all of which are credible sources, not YouTube videos, either from official government records, peer-reviewed scientific journals, or nationally syndicated news outlets. For those who have been in the military or are currently serving, a country brief is certainly nothing that is unfamiliar to you. However, for the over 75% of age-eligible Americans who are not even qualified to begin military service, or the remainder of the less than 99% of those who are qualified but are not so inclined, this exercise in familiarization with an area of geopolitical significance to national security and objectives may be something entirely new to you, or novel, to use the term now in vogue, arising from the emergence of a less than 5% pathogen that has managed somehow to baffle scientists, causing them to suddenly evolve science while keeping political leaders elected and appointed to appear to do nothing but make a best guess at predictions as to where an invisible enemy will strike next, a truly astounding achievement for a single strand of RNA wrapped in a sheath adorned with signature crowns, alleged to have evolved zoonotically through natural selection. If you are evolving slower than your enemy, you will eventually die. Perhaps the gods of nature had destined this nanoparticle for conquest of empires and natural selection, granting it a crown. This brief is unclassified. As we had indicated in our last briefing on December 4th, in a joint statement with Senator Marco Rubio for the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence, Senator Mark Warner agreed that the Communist Party of China represented the greatest national security threat to the United States, and emphasized his clear determination and strongly held conviction that the Chinese Communist Party will stop at nothing to exert its global dominance. This bipartisan statement was published and disseminated to the press at a time marking nearly the first anniversary since the emergence of a novel coronavirus in Wuhan, in the Hubei province, that to date has been responsible, as of February 13th, for 27,229,862 laboratory-confirmed cases in the United States, 706,574 in the last week, and 473,699 deaths, according to the national tracker maintained by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Moreover, as also indicated in our last briefing, since March 27th, Senator Warner has failed to even acknowledge receipt of an intelligence estimate regarding the variant migration that had been discovered by researchers at Moss Lab that had been tasked by the World Health Organization to support Situation Report Number 3, dated January 23rd, 2020. It's on the web, look it up. So, since at least last January, if Senator Warner had been performing his duties on the Intelligence Committee, he should have noticed that a novel coronavirus from China managed to escape the draconian lockdowns in Wuhan and mass populate in the Republic of South Korea, the avowed enemy of the People's Republic of China, by coincidence, but somehow sparing from any infections or, by their official reports, any deaths to date in the Republic of North Korea, a fellow communist nation and their nearest ally within the region. And if he had not, on March 27th, we had submitted an intelligence estimate to remind him of that fact in hopes of bipartisan cooperation, placing the needs of the nation first. But what else should Senator Warner have known about the Chinese Communist Party, or even before these reports, that should have at least placed him on alert, acting in due diligence? This is a country report. It is perhaps a not well-known fact that biological warfare is the world's oldest weapon of mass destruction, and it had been deployed by the Mongols as far back as 1347. in the present-day Ukraine, with perhaps the unintended consequence of what modern scientists attribute as the causative agent for the Black Plague, which managed to kill 1/3 of the world population in collateral damage. In the 18th century, the Russians used weaponized plague against the Swedes, and the British weaponized smallpox against Native Americans, purposely. Any strategic intelligence professional knows this fact is a common knowledge fact, even if you don't, because you are not in intelligence. The advantage of biological warfare is the element of surprise, enabling a bad actor to avoid culpability for an extended period of time because it has the ability to clean the scene of the crime, remove the fingerprints, enabling a perpetrator to act like an anonymous troll on the internet, a masked bandit on the highway, or any other means to conspire to conceal the identity of the aggressor, and permitting them an incredibly almost infinite amount of time to essentially shift the blame to some other plausible cause, or even to frame an adversary. Because it is not infectious or easily transmitted from person to person, anthrax was deployed by both the Germans as well as Japanese during World War II. But the Japanese experimented extensively with direct infections against Chinese prisoners in Manchuria, resulting in over 10,000 fatalities. However, today, the United Nations has greatly reduced the appeal of this biological munition, putting on the good man hat because the prohibitive cost associated with the production weapons grade anthrax is a strong indicator of state-sponsored terror if you suddenly see outbreaks of anthrax occurring anywhere. In 1971, when the Nixon administration opened the door to China, one of the required agreements for recognition of the People's Republic of China rather than Taiwan was for the communist nation to agree to the United Nations Accords on biological weapons, which today has a total of 189 signatories of civilized nations, and which they agreed to do in 1974, but did not deposit signed accession documents until a decade later on November 15, 1984, with a wide range of technical reasons for the delay. However, when the documents were delivered to the ambassadors in New York, Washington, and Moscow, Chinese diplomats prepared a memorialization note stating in high diplomatic language that you have to be a little educated to understand. The basic spirit of the Convention of the Prohibition of Biological Weapons conforms to China's consistent position and is conducive to the efforts of the world's peace-loving countries and peoples in fighting against aggression and maintaining world peace. China once was the victim of biological, bacteriological weapons. China has not produced or possessed such weapons and will never do so in the future. However, the Chinese government considers that the convention has its defects. For instance, it fails to provide in explicit terms for the prohibition of the use of biological weapons and the concrete and effective measures for supervision and verification. And it lacks forceful measures of sanctions in the procedure of complaint against instances of violation of the convention. It is the hope of the Chinese government that these defects may be made up or corrected at an appropriate time. It is also the hope of the Chinese government that a convention on complete prohibition and thorough destruction of chemical weapons will soon be concluded. In plain English, the Chinese Communist Party agreed that the treaty was a beautiful statement of high aspirations and hollow platitudes, but with no enforcement provisions, and agreed to be bound by those ambiguous terms until such time in the future as a better agreement might be executed. And if you are ever invited to a poker game and don't know who the sucker is, keep playing. It is of note that since that time, that on several occasions the Chinese Communist regime has been found in violation of the principles that has caused multiple informal complaints, but lacking even a mechanism to enforce the treaty even almost 40 years after they expressly identified the loopholes. No better agreement has been executed than the one with which they agreed to abide in 1984. And today, despite viruses being the most abundant biological particles in the world, that before COVID-19 had only produced a total of 220 harmful to mankind, do the math, including the most recent additions of both SARS and MERS, reportedly zoonotic evolutions from bat coronaviruses that are found only in China, where there is even a military-grade virological institute co-located near a known source. Coincidence? There is today a novel coronavirus that has developed into a pandemic, despite not possessing the secondary attack rate statistically significant enough to be validated as a cause of infection being transmitted from person to person. Less than 5%, 4 times too low, and much less to be described as highly contagious, the sine qua non for a super spreader event, which scientists have known since the 80s, despite many claims by noted authorities like Dr. Anthony Fauci in the news. We have on several occasions attempted to obtain responses from Dr. Fauci to resolve these discrepancies, but like the nation's only physician serving as a state governor, who has even gone to the extent to evade a service of summons from the sheriff, as well as the United States Marshal in obstruction of justice in cases brought in court, a felony punishable by up to 20 years in prison for each count, establishing a felony conspiracy to violate civil rights, as well as a pattern of racketeering activity under the RICO Act. The main expert, Dr. Fauci, on whom Senator Warner has repeatedly stated that he relies, has elected to exercise his right to remain silent. And you could take that for what it's worth. As stated by the Supreme Court in the case against General Aaron Burr for treason in 1807, if the gentleman had believed this decision to be favorable to him, we would have heard of it in the beginning of his argument. For the path of inquiry in which he was led him directly to it. Interpreting the American Constitution, he would have preferred no authority to that of the Supreme Court of the country. Yes, sir, he would have immediately seized this decision with avidity. He would have set it before you in every possible light. He would have illustrated it. He would have adorned it. You would have seen it under the actions of his genius appear with all the varying grandeur of our mountains in the morning sun. He would not have relinquished it for the common law, nor have deserted a rock so broad and solid to walk upon the waves of the Atlantic. But he knew that this decision closed against him completely the very point for which he was laboring. Hence it was a decision was kept so sedulously out of view until from the excluded materials of the common law he thought he had reared a Gothic edifice, so huge and so dark as quite to overshadow and eclipse it. Let us bring it from this obscurity into the face of day. We who are seeking truth and not victory, whether right or wrong, have no reason to turn our eyes from any source of light which presents itself, and least of all from a source so high and so respectable as the decision of the Supreme Court of the United States. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for governor of Virginia. I ask every Christian, every conservative, every Republican, every Democrat, every liberal, every conservative, and every Virginian and American true to like the motto of the imagery, follow me and we shall overcome. Honest. And y'all come back now. Yeah. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.